Internet banking.
Internet banking.
Internet dating. Internet dating. Internetese. Internetese.
Internist.
Internist.
Internment.
Internment.
An internment camp.
Internship.
Internship.
Interpenetrate.
Interpenetrate.
Interpersonal.
Interpersonal.
Interpersonal skills. Interpersonal communication.
Interplanetary.
Interplanetary.
Interplanetary space missions.
Interplay.
Interplay.
The interplay of ideas.
The interplay between military and civilian populations.
Interpol.
Interpol.
Interpolate.
Interpolate.
Interpose.
Interpose.
She interposed herself between the general and his wife.
That might be difficult, interposed Regina.
Interpret.
Interpret.
They spoke good Spanish and promised to interpret for me.
His refusal to work late was interpreted as a lack of commitment to the company.
Freud's attempts to interpret the meaning of dreams. Freud's attempts to interpret the meaning of dreams. Interpretation.
Interpretation.
One possible interpretation is that they want you to resign.
It's difficult to put an accurate interpretation on the survey results. It's difficult to put an accurate interpretation on the survey results. What exactly the author meant by that statement is open to interpretation.
Laurence Olivier's brilliant interpretation of Henry V. Laurence Olivier's brilliant interpretation of Henry V.
Interpretative.
Interpretative.
Reading is an interpretative process. Interpretive dance.
Interpreter.
Interpreter.
Speaking through an interpreter, Ahmed said, "I'm very worried about my wife and children."
Interpretive.
Interpretive.
Interracial.
Interracial.
Interracial marriage.
Interrail.
Interrail. We spent 3 weeks interrailing around Europe.
Interregnum.
Interregnum.
Interrelate.
Interrelate.
We will be discussing how the interests of state, parent and child interrelate.
Each part of the course interrelates with all the others.
Interrelated.
Interrelated.
Unemployment and inflation are interrelated.
Many interrelated factors are at work here.
Interrelationship.
Interrelationship.
Interrogate.
Interrogate.
The police interrogated the suspect for several hours.
He refused to tell his interrogators anything.
Interrogation.
Interrogation. A long interrogation. Under interrogation, he admitted that he had taken the money.
Interrogative.
Interrogative.
Put this statement into the interrogative.
Interrupt.
Interrupt.
Will you stop interrupting me?
Sorry to interrupt, but I need to ask you to come downstairs.
We can talk here without interruption.
Intersect.
Intersect.
The plane is intersected by a network of canals.
Intersection.
Intersection.
Intersex. Intersex.
Intersperse.
Intersperse.
Sunny periods interspersed with showers.
Interstate.
Interstate.
Interstate commerce.
Interstellar.
Interstellar.
Interstice.
Interstice.
Intertwine.
Intertwine.
The problems of crime and unemployment are closely intertwined.
A necklace of rubies intertwined with pearls.
Interval.
Interval.
He left the room, returning after a short interval with a message.
The interval between arrest and trial can be up to 6 months.
The trains run at half-hourly intervals. The phone rang at regular intervals all afternoon.
Trees had been planted at regular intervals.
We can get some drinks in the interval.
Intervene.
Intervene.
The police don't usually like to intervene in disputes between husbands and wives.
The army will have to intervene to prevent further fighting.
Stop shouting, Emily, John intervened.
He was just establishing his career when the war intervened.
In the 6 years that intervened, I saw them once.
Intervening.
Intervening.
I hadn't seen him since 1980, and he'd aged a lot in the intervening years.
Intervention.
Intervention.
Government intervention to regulate prices.
Interventionist.
Interventionist.
The UN adopted a more interventionist approach in the region.
Interview. Interview.
An interview for a job on the Los Angeles Times.
A portfolio of work presented at interview.
An interview with the president. Elton John gave an interview to Barbara Walters.
An exclusive interview. A police interview.
We're interviewing 6 candidates for the job.
The police want to interview you about the accident.
Interviewing skills.
Interviewee.
Interviewee.
Interviewer.
Interviewer.
Interwar.
Interwar.
The interwar years.
Interweave.
Interweave.
The two themes are inextricably interwoven in the book.
Practical help for the bereaved interwoven with emotional support.
Silk interwoven with gold and silver threads.
Intestate.
Intestate.
Intestine.
Intestine.
In thing.
In thing.
Intimacy.
Intimacy.
The intimacy of marriage.
A close sense of intimacy between parent and child.
She thought back over the intimacies they'd shared and the plans they'd made. She thought back over the intimacies they'd shared and the plans they'd made.
The cosy intimacy of the cafe. Intimate.
Intimate.
The intimate atmosphere of a country pub.
An intimate meal for two.
The collection has been moved from its intimate setting to the British Museum.
An intimate friend of Picasso's.
An intimate relationship. She's on intimate terms with people in government.
His intimate knowledge of the coal industry.
The publication of intimate details of their affair.
The virus can only be transmitted through intimate contact.
The intimate connection between physical and mental health. The two aspects are intimately connected.
I am intimately acquainted with the state of my bank account. He intimated, politely but firmly, that we were not welcome.
She had already intimated to me her wish to leave.
Intimation.
Intimation.
The first intimations of the approaching conflict.
Without early intimation of the dates of the training sessions, enthusiasm for training could decrease.
Intimidate.
Intimidate.
They tried to intimidate the young people into voting for them.
Attempts to intimidate her failed.
The whole idea of going to Oxford intimidated me.
She had endured years of intimidation and violence. The intimidation of voters.
Intimidated.
Intimidated.
I was shy and felt intimidated by the older students.
Intimidating.
Intimidating.
Some people find interview situations very intimidating.
Inter.
Into.
Come into the office.
He thrust his hand into his coat pocket.
There must be another way into the cave.
Sue got back into bed and pulled the quilt over her head.
I've got to go into town this morning. We dived into the sea.
At the age of 16, I went into the printing trade as an apprentice.
They tried to drag me into their quarrel.
A player who deserves to get back into the England team.
She fell into a deep sleep.
The whole banking system was thrown into confusion.
I screwed my wet handkerchief into a ball.
Cut the cake into pieces.
Neruda's poems have been translated into English.
He almost bumped into me as he rushed past. He almost bumped into me as he rushed past.
The car swerved and crashed into the wall.
They rode off into the sunset.
Make sure you're speaking directly into the microphone.
Andy and I talked well into the night.
John was well into his 40s before he got married.
An investigation into the events leading up to his death.
I've been doing some research into this.
8 into 24 is 3.
I'm really into folk music.
He's into me for $50.
Intolerable.
Intolerable.
This is intolerable, exclaimed Sir Rufus.
The pain had become intolerable.
Caring for an elderly relative can become an intolerable burden.
Intolerable.
Intolerance.
Intolerance.
An intolerance of alcohol.
Intolerant.
Intolerant.
People who are intolerant of other people's political beliefs.
A number of patients were intolerant of the diet.
She's lactose intolerant. She's lactose intolerant.
Intonation.
Intonation.
Intonation patterns.
Intone.
Intone.
The priest intoned the blessing.
In toto.
In toto.
They accepted the plan in toto.
Intoxicant.
Intoxicant.
Intoxicated.
Intoxicated.
The driver was clearly intoxicated.
He rapidly became intoxicated with his own power.
Intoxicating.
Intoxicating.
The intoxicating combination of her beauty and wit.
Intra.
Intra.
Intradepartmental.
An intravenous injection.
Intractable.
Intractable.
The seemingly intractable problem of human greed.
Intramural.
Intramural.
An intramural softball competition.
Intranet.
Intranet.
Intransigent.
Intransigent.
An intransigent attitude.
He accused the government of intransigence.
Intransitive.
Intransitive.
Intrapreneur.
Intrapreneur.
Intrastate.
Intrastate.
Interstate commerce.
Intravenous.
Intravenous.
An intravenous injection.
Intravenous drug users. Intray.
Intray.
Intrepid.
Intrepid.
Intrepid explorers.
Intricacy.
Intricacy.
The intricacies of private banking.
Designs of amazing intricacy and sophistication.
Intricate.
Intricate.
Intricate patterns.
Intricately woven fabric.
Intrigue.
Intrigue.
Other people's houses always intrigued her.
While King Richard was abroad, the barons had been intriguing against him.
It's an exciting story of political intrigue and murder. A web of intrigue.
The political intrigues of the capital.
Intrigued.
Intrigued.
He was intrigued by her reaction.
She was intrigued to know what he planned to do next.
Intriguing.
Intriguing.
The magazine carries an intriguing mixture of high fashion, gossip and racing.
Intrinsic.
Intrinsic.
The intrinsic interest of the subject.
There is nothing in the intrinsic nature of the work that makes it more suitable for women.
Flexibility is intrinsic to creative management.
Science is seen as intrinsically good.
There is nothing in the intrinsic nature of the work that makes it more suitable for women.
Intro.
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 Intro. Introspection. Introduce.
Introduce.
Have you two been introduced? Tom, this is
June. Let me introduce you to Bob.
May I introduce myself? My name is Meg Johnson.
They want to introduce a system of identity cards.
The store have introduced a new range of food for children.
The grey squirrel was introduced into Britain from North America.
Malcolm introduced me to the joys of wine tasting. Malcolm introduced me to the joys of wine tasting.
Jim Adams will introduce tonight's programme.
Several senators introduced legislation aimed at sexual harassment.
Fuel was introduced into the jet pipe.
Introduction.
Introduction.
The introduction of a range of new products.
With the introduction of independent taxation, a married woman's position is much clearer.
The introduction of Buddhism to China, nearly 2,000 years ago.
The potato was a 16th century introduction.
Pete, are you going to make the introductions? Our first contestant needs no introduction.
In the introduction, he explains why he wrote the book.
Mr. Brown gave a brief introduction to the course.
The book is a useful introduction to British geology.
An introduction to water sports.
Introductory.
Introductory.
The objectives described in the introductory chapter.
As the chairman said in his introductory remarks.
An introductory course in data processing. Don't miss our introductory offer.
Introductory.
Introspection.
Introspection.
Introspective.
Introspective.
A shy and introspective person.
Introvert.
Introvert.
Introverted.
Introverted.
Intrude.
Intrude.
Would I be intruding if I came with you?
Employers should not intrude into the private lives of their employees.
It is to be hoped that TV cameras never intrude on this peaceful place.
Intruder.
The police think the intruder got in through an unlocked window.
At first, I felt like an intruder in their family.
Intrusion.
Intrusion.
I resented this intrusion into my domestic affairs.
The unwelcome intrusion of the press.
The intrusion of badly designed new buildings in the historic High Street.
Intrusive.
Intrusive.
They found the television cameras too intrusive.
Intuit.
Intuit.
Intuition.
Intuition.
Feminine intuition.
Intuition told her it was unwise to argue.
He had an intuition there was trouble brewing.
We should trust our intuitions.
Intuitive.
Intuitive.
He seemed to have an intuitive awareness of how I felt.
Inuk. Inuit.
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 Inuk.
Inuk.
Inundate.
Inundate.
After the broadcast, we were inundated with requests for more information.
The tidal wave inundated vast areas of cropland.
Inure.
Inure.
Nurses soon become inured to the sight of suffering.
Invade.
Invade.
The Romans invaded Britain 2,000 years ago.
Every summer the town is invaded by tourists.
Fans invaded the pitch at half-time.
What right does he have to invade my privacy?
Patients are given the feeling that they mustn't try to invade medical territory.
Invader.
Invader.
Invaders ransacked the town.
Invalid.
Invalid.
Without the right date stamped on it, your ticket will be invalid. File name in invalid format. File name in invalid format.
I resented being treated as an invalid.
Invalidate.
Invalidate.
Failure to disclose all relevant changes may invalidate your policy.
Later findings invalidated the theory.
Invalidity.
Invalidity.
Invalidity benefit.
Invaluable.
Invaluable.
Your advice has been invaluable to us.
This help was invaluable in focusing my ideas.
The Internet is an invaluable source of information.
Invariable.
Invariable.
His invariable answer was, wait and see.
Mass, unlike weight, is invariable.
Invariably.
Invariably.
It invariably rains when I go there.
The security guards were invariably ex-servicemen.
Invasion.
Invasion.
The invasion of Normandy.
The annual invasion of teenagers for the Glastonbury Festival.
Invasive.
Invasive.
Invasive surgery.
Invasive bladder cancers.
Invective.
Invective.
He let out a stream of invective.
Inveigle.
Invey.
Inveigle.
Inveigle.
She had inveigled me into taking messages to her lover. She had inveigled me into taking messages to her lover.
Invent.
Invent.
Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone in 1876.
They invented a very convincing alibi.
Invention.
Invention.
The dishwasher is a wonderful invention.
The invention of the computer has revolutionized the business world.
With such powers of invention, he should get a job easily.
Inventive.
Inventive.
One of the most talented and inventive drummers in modern music.
Inventor.
Inventor.
Inventory.
Inventory.
We made an inventory of everything in the apartment.
Inverse.
Inverse.
Clearly, the amount of money people save increases in inverse proportion to the amount they spend.
The inverse relationship between prices and interest rates.
Inversion.
Inversion.
Invert.
Invert.
Invertebrate.
Invertebrate.
Inverted comma.
Inverted comma.
Her friends, in inverted commas, all disappeared when she was in trouble.
Inverted snobbery.
Inverted snobbery.
Invest.
Invest.
I've got a few $1,000s I'm looking to invest.
Oliver made a fortune by investing in antique furniture.
Williams invested a large sum of money in Swiss stocks.
He had invested heavily in the bond market.
The city has invested millions of dollars in the museum.
He had invested heavily in the bond market.
The city has invested millions of dollars in the museum.
The factory plans to invest in new computers.
It's about time you invested in a new shirt.
Everyone here has a lot invested in their careers.
Jody has invested Alan with great power over her career.
Richard's heavy-rimmed glasses invested him with an air of intelligence. Richard's heavy-rimmed glasses invested him with an air of intelligence.
Investigate.
Investigate.
The state police are investigating the incident.
The study investigates the impact of violent TV programming on children.
I heard a noise and went downstairs to investigate.
Penny was already being investigated by the police on suspicion of murder.
Investigation.
Investigation.
The investigation continued for nearly 3 years.
The authorities are planning to launch a full-scale investigation into the crash.
Baker demanded an investigation of the district attorney's office. A criminal investigation. A private detective was hired to conduct the investigation.
The investigation of computer fraud.
The whole issue is still under investigation.
Investigative.
Investigative.
Investigator.
Investigator.
Police investigators.
Investigatory.
Investigatory.
The investigatory powers of the Office of Fair Trading.
Investiture.
Investiture.
The investiture of the Prince of Wales.
Investment.
Investment.
We plan to buy some property as an investment.
That year, Japanese investment in American real estate totaled $13.06 billion.
Each of us was required to put up a minimum investment of $5,000.
The lessons cost me over $500, but I consider them a good investment. A huge investment of time and effort.
Investment bank.
Investment bank.
Investment club.
Investment club.
O'Hara belongs to an investment club in Detroit.
Investor.
Investor.
Inveterate.
Inveterate.
Invidious.
Invidious.
By innocently lying to detectives, she'd put herself in an invidious position.
Invigilate.
Invigilate.
Invigorate.
Invigorate.
At my age, the walk into town is enough to invigorate me.
He felt invigorated after a day in the country.
Carrie's hope was that the church would be renewed and invigorated.
Invigorating.
Invigorating.
An invigorating swim before breakfast.
Invincible.
Invincible.
An invincible army.
Young athletes think of themselves as invincible.